Good morning, everyone. My name is Eric. I'm one of the volunteers here at PyData in New York. Thanks for coming out so early in the morning and taking some time out of your day for the conference. Today we'll do a tutorial by Erin Mikail Staples, a developer experience engineer from Launch Darkly. Today, this tutorial will be evaluating a database architecture, deploy an API with feature flags, and take an API from beta to, I guess, widespread release.
Yeah, we're going to do some different segment releases, but yeah, first off, give us a hand for yourself for getting out this morning. We made it out of bed before, especially in conference days, who comes to conferences at 9 a.m., right? How many people are traveling for work? You guys are local? Okay, this is what happens. You go to a conference in New York and everybody's like, of course, duh, local here. Same, so your guys' subway commutes were wonderful, right? I was a G to the E. Anybody else? Would we run the same G to the E here? No other Brooklynites. Okay, that's fine. Live your best life, I guess. All that being said, as Eric said, my name is Erin. We've got a little bit of echo here. That's off. Here we go. Top one of the day. I have to be the pancake, the one that you flip out and save. My name is Erin Mikail Staples. I am a developer experience engineer at Launch Darkly. Outside of that, I am a stand-up comedian who does produce AI comedy. So if you guys want to geek out about Docker files and retraining models, using fine-tuned learning and retraining for comedic purposes, I'm also happy to geek out about that as well. But in today's talk, I'm just curious to know how many people are familiar with Fast API, or we've got one in the room. Cool, we got a few in the room. This is totally fair if you're at this level. This is a beginner level tutorial, and they don't like when you step here apparently in the mic. How many people know what Launch Darkly is or what feature flag is? We've got a few people in the room. Awesome. How many people are just this was the most exciting thing on my schedule and least likely to be on the boring specter this morning? Okay, no one wants to admit that. That's fine. We'll give it a win there, but I'm a big believer we gotta do things for fun. So the iconic movie and the tales that Ian Fleming wrote from the secret super spy that has captured so many imaginations first started in the 1960s. Now, I don't say that to excite you or walk off or anything, but you guys get the idea. What are the good traits of being a good spy? You're obviously going to be the loudest one in the room. You're going to stumble in. You're going to go full horse barreling in, right? Kidding. We're going to be moving with stealth. We're going to be moving with suave. We're going to be making some smooth moves. And what we're going to be talking about today is walking through a little bit how you can build a system that has those built-in kind of escape hatches in case something goes wrong in your deployment, because all of us have had those moments. All right, enough on there. All right, a bit about me. Like Eric said, I'm a developer experience engineer at Launch Darkly. Very new to the team there. I'm a rescue dog mom. There is actually no pictures of my dog in this presentation, but hit me up. I'll be around the conference all weekends, and I'm emceeing and volunteering at this conference. Like I said, I'm also a stand-up comedian. All of this is open source, available online, so you can see my bugs in real time. Have a great time. You can also find me online at those various links. A bit more about myself. I am a self-taught developer. Anybody else self-taught here in the world? Awesome. You people, not to be biased, but you're a little bit of my favorites. I joke around that I am a chaos developer, meaning I went to school for journalism, and I love journalism so much I went to school not only once, but twice for journalism. Most of my experience and learning comes from breaking things. I broke a lot of websites. It started breaking a lot of websites. Shopify sites were the first thing that I broke almost all the time. But the most rewarding experiences were actually cleaning up the mess in the aftermath. What can we learn from having to put together the thing that we built? However, companies don't really like when you do this on their dime. especially when you're doing it in production. Flashback to one of my first jobs out of college. A developer I worked with, and one of my very first dev jobs ever wrote, he wrote a stinky butt lorem ipsum, so you can imagine what that was. We accidentally shipped it to production on a client's website that was paying. Not great. Things you learn, do not use that as a lorem ipsum as a funny internal joke that does make its way to real life production. It's not great. What we're going to be going over today is if you decide to do that, how would you roll that back? Or how do we deploy with stealth and save our butt in the times that we need to do so? So, we have that slide type. But why is this so important? Well, anytime that we're working, how many people kind of getting in the room here? Is the room data science? Are we got a lot of infrastructure people? Are we in the ops space? Are we in the machine learning space? Where are we at? Data scientists here? Okay, good. PyData, I kind of assume a lot of you. We have any machine learning folks here? Got a few? Cool. Anybody who's just, I have no idea what I'm doing and I'm just here as a chaos dev, because that would be me. That would be yeah, okay, cool, great. We relate, Conrad, we got it. Well, this is important because guess what? Ish happens. Anytime that you're shipping or developing a deployment and you're building these big tests, it can be a really scary, intimidating circumstances. If you've ever worked in an organization that has your tests and production going and you've been working a lot of changes in test, and you ship it all over at once, sometimes it's hard to know exactly what went wrong in the deployment process, or like what exactly does that bug, or what other things were impacted when we pushed that to production that we didn't realize happened down the line. Very important to just make sure that we're kind of going through the steps and dialing it in where we need to do. So having this kind of background always helps out, just in case something goes wrong. So fun fact, if you couldn't tell, a bit of a James Bond nerd. So much so I named my dog after a character. This was a world record explosion that actually they had tested at scale multiple times before they did it. So it even started with little small mini explosions in a shop. That wasn't their first time doing this. It would be really cool if it was, but a lot of work went behind it. It did break a world record. But more importantly, the thing that we can take away from this is the importance of making sure that we're having the explosions that we want and not the explosions that we don't necessarily want. So those calculated, precise, planned explosions, and if something does happen, how do we hit that undo button really fast? So today's adventure, first off, we're going to be talking about database architectures. So what makes a good database? What's the difference between infrastructure and architecture? How do they relate to another, and why should we care? Especially for those chaos devs in the room, why do we need to care about that stuff? How do we set up environments with stealth in mind? So how do we set up our deployments so that we can put a feature flag in place and roll it back, or have those safeguards in place when we're building? So if we've launched an API, we've made changes, crap, they were the wrong changes, how do we deploy that back really quickly? And then lastly, how do we build like we're building straight out of James Bond's tool belt? So a process that continues to iterate with you and grows with scale. So I highly doubt that like if you are how many people are working in companies that have like a PM or you work really closely with a PM or a project manager? We had a few? Okay. So when we're thinking, this is like the really big thing is as your company or your organization scales, if we're building with a PM in mind, how do we set up systems that don't necessarily need someone in the code base every single day? So it's just a toggle on, toggle off. No code options that can kind of help you control or release features without making it so that everybody's in the code base and holy cow, now you're in a giant mess of everybody in there. I'm seeing some nods of, oh man, we've had everybody in the code base. All right, is there any tracking? Any questions? Anything on this list that we are missing that we want to go on the adventure for? I know caffeine hasn't kicked in yet, but. All right, so first off, building databases that scale. What do we think are important when it comes to building a database that scales? This is the most important thing. Quiet room today. Most important thing is definitely thinking about it from a long-term perspective. So in my opinion, that really comes down to mapping it out before it even happens. So how are you thinking of your columns? How are you thinking of the different elements that go into this? How are you thinking of the different projects that open up? And I'm pulling up another project right now. So this is when we start to get to the fun building it live section of this demo. So I love pop culture data sets with a passion. Anytime that I think you can make something relatable and awesome. Relatable and awesome, that's the words we're gonna do. I think you always can get a win here. So this is a open source database that I run and have built a couple open source maintainers on the internet that we hang out and build stuff about pop culture data sets on Twitch, because what else do you have to do for fun in your summer? Has anybody seen the TV show? It's got 23 seasons long, Naked and Afraid. The premise of the TV show is a reality TV show. It's like Survivor, but even less survival skills, more reality TV show. They drop people off in the wilderness and they say, go survive for 90 days and you are in the wilderness naked and afraid. We built a Naked and Afraid database, but you can see it here, you can access it. One of the things that we really thought of is, when building this database, what are the important parts to set up? Like how do we need to make sure that these schemas or these things are all in a way that is actually helpful? So one of the things that we realized is in the TV show, these people, and there's a data set that's out there, we have things like country, or it was all of the data was based on location. That being said, some people, Georgia is a country and a state. We had to go through and do a lot of data cleanup to make sure that we were comparing like terms. So one of those first steps to building a scalable database is making sure that we're comparing like terms. So you can go ahead and see if you wanted to scroll through how we kind of process this data, and we can see whether, one, giving everything a unique ID, so making sure that we can reference everything. Two, putting it a country name, so breaking it down to not only just the states, but going back and cleaning up where the country data needed to be country data, and cleaning it up so you also have your episode locations. That all being said, you can see a lot of work if you want to follow along. You can see our very messy SQL queries there. That all being said is making sure you're comparing like to like data. Locations, if you're and also writing this stuff down. Many times we build it and we think in our heads, oh, location, that's gonna be obvious. Country, right? No, I'm gonna pass it off to someone else. They might not recognize it. They might not have that information in that context that's so important. I think right now, the fact rate out there is like 1.7 something terabytes of data now. And making sure that we're providing context every time that we have data is more important than ever. Otherwise, you're just getting a bunch of terrible data. The other couple things that we need to take in consideration here is, how many of us have been here? Because that was actually my demo as of Saturday. I jumped in to fill in this tutorial on Friday. So I was given the weekend to build this tutorial, and on Saturday I decided I didn't want to work in Flask and I was building in Fast API. So this is what my files look like. These are terrible file names, by the way. And this isn't a case of do as I say, not as I do, because don't look at my GitHub right now. This is kind of what it looks like. That all being said is, be really clear and descriptive when you're filing your file names. When is it final? When is it updated? And how are you storing that information? The next one is the other thing, but I am also guilty of. How many people have those git commit messages that are like, please work, damn it now, please? Why is not working? This was working yesterday. I had a problem, I laughed, this is like tangent here, but I have a problem. I was building in a MySQL database literally 2 days ago. I was wondering why it wasn't working, and I forgot that you can't use kebab case in MySQL. And I was yelling at it I was like, this is the dumbest thing I was literally doing. Y'all, just a reminder, you can't use kebab case in MySQL. Things I remembered in the process of doing it. But that all being said, these aren't, these are all silly memes and we're all relatable because we've all done it. But making sure that we're building scalable infrastructure, scalable procedures, and having a standard across an entire organization. One thing that I learned early on in my career, despite having terrible git commits sometimes, one of the things I actually do enjoy is having good file management systems. So making sure that we are naming files with the same, I worked for a founder once that was very particular on how his date time structure was always set up. He was like, you were always going to do year, then month, then day. always, religiously, numerical, always. And would down to people who are on non-technical teams, he'd be like they'd submit an email and they'd put the date in the wrong format and he'd be like, nope, this company is a year, month, date. This is how we're doing it. End of sentence. Building these kind of things are not just like a silly quirk, but actually help in your long-term data infrastructure. All right. So this begs the question, this is another hot button topic. Does anybody want to attempt to define data infrastructure versus data architecture? Anybody in the room want to take it? What divides the two of these? Go for it.
What tools you're using versus how you model the data.
Yeah, what tools you're using versus how you model the data, which, love that. I wanted to make sure that the architecture is set up first, but that slide transition is a little off, but architecture, that setup and design, so just like as Conrad said, architecture, setup and design of your system. This includes context, especially in any time that we're building. We have a few folks here in the machine learning world. Context is so important, context is key. Add context to why you're building the data, where the data came from, and what it's been doing. If you're working on data of any type, if you're labeling data, or you have different metadata that comes with your stuff, that's part of your architecture. How is metadata stored? What metadata is important? How are you handling that? Architecture also includes relationships with other components. What plugins, who has access to this data, who has permissions to read this data, who has permissions to write this data, how are we keeping this data secure? Also under architecture, and this is where we start to kind of bleed the lines a little bit, automations, workflow, and the agility and the ability to process in and out. And then infrastructure, just as Conrad said, how the architecture is put into use. So what actual tools and tech stack are you building? How are you deploying it? Where are you deploying it? Where is it hosted? Is this a traditional deployment or a cloud-based deployment? All right, any questions here? Anything that I missed on this slide? Oh, cool, feel free to take a picture. All of this, again, will be available online afterwards. Just hit me up after the conference and I'll give you a QR code to the repo and it'll have links to this in there as well. So if you have any questions, hit me up, find me, I'll be here all 3 days. Also, I'm very online, hang out with me. All right, so we're gonna be setting up our workspace. If you want to whip out your laptop and we can play along together, we can do so. I'll give you some cool API keys and you guys can test out, we can build some feature flags. If you're like, nah, I just wanna drink my coffee and listen to your voice, Erin, that's cool too. I'm okay with that. I've heard it's probably not the best. I don't have a very, Morgan Freeman voice, but you're welcome to just listen in if that's your jam as well. So if you wanted to follow along, this is when I refresh my screen. Here's a little screenshot, a little QR code here. Or you can go ahead and go to erin.cool/shiplikeaspy. And that will take you, what we're working off of is just a Next.js front end. And it's built and hosted off of Vercel. This will take you to the GitHub. You can also see my messy commits on there. Then it also has a fast API kind of quasi backend right now. So you can see how it would work together if you were connecting the two of them. And then it's got some cool commented out code for how we're gonna be going through that. So I'll give everybody a quick moment here. Also after the talk today, it is on my to-do list to make sure that all of the assets from today's talk are on that QR code. So feel free to stick around and all of that will be there. So if you guys wanna watch it, feel free to check out there. So this is kind of one of those situations of, found out I was giving a tutorial on Friday and it is now Wednesday. So building really quick. So for those of you who don't know, raise your hand if you're familiar with what LaunchDarkly is. A few folks in the room. LaunchDarkly is an organization and is a tool, it's a dev tool that helps developers control what features are released to whom and when. So this lets you control anything from versions of APIs. This lets you put those nice hot eject buttons if you want to kind of roll back just an individual part of your page rather than rolling back your entire project. This lets you deploy different features and projects, words today, Erin, throughout different parts of the organization. So if you wanted to launch, one of the things that I had personally used this for before joining the company is I actually launched a beta API with LaunchDarkly, meaning rolling it out in different phases. So first we're gonna release this to only developers, then we're gonna release it out to developers that are in this region, then we're going to be releasing it to widespread, so if you want to do those version types of releases. All of these can happen within the backend, and then like I mentioned and alluded to earlier, if you're working with a team of product managers or non-technical folks that might need to be able to turn on these assets, rather than them being like, please help me launch this new feature, you can give them a nice little toggle where you can turn it on and turn it off, all within the code base in a nice little no-code fashion. So this is what it looks like. Using some quick little rundown here. Pretty simple, it's kind of an if-else statement. That's a lot of what we're gonna be working with today is those if-else statements and rocking and rolling. So now we got to the quick little show part of our demo, but we're gonna be building this further. So this is our goofy little app that we've been working on, is this beautiful Vercel or site that's posted on Vercel. I'll pop it up here for y'all. It is my James Bond fan site. You guys can see this here, which what we got here, and this is just a template that Vercel has. It has just a nice little front end, and then of course we're getting a 404 on that. That is where our API is going to be built. What that looks like on the back end side of things. I'm going to pull up. This is what I'm going to quickly do, a quick screen swap it in here. What this looks like from the back-end side of things, so if you fork that repo or took that repo down, what it's going to show us, and that's kind of where it's giving me, it's probably having an issue with the virtual environment. We've got our Next.js front end here under app, where it's got all of our information here that loads this front page. And then our fast API would be right here. So it's giving us a nice little hello world error. Let's see, we've got a virtual environment here. So you get the idea there. I don't know if that actually ran. With that all being said, going back to our deck. Let's see where we're working with. So all of these, what we're going to be working on today is making sure that, one, we get our virtual environment a little bit up and going, actually connected to this, but making sure we're going in and building out these feature flags here. So customizing, one, inserting our groups here that we'll have. So this is just an example user that I quickly put in. It is a static one, so not dynamically updated, just for the sake of the tutorial, but also we're setting up our different feature flags that if we want to turn on our early launch features here, we can do so. And this is just a nice little SDK key. I am doing very bad development practices and showing you all of my secrets because this is a demo app, so have fun, go crash some demos. But, moving on, where the party is. So the cool thing about LaunchDarkly is you can use this both in the front end and the back end. So if you're doing it in the front end, if we wanted to redo the very beautiful design that I've spent probably 15 minutes on of that website, you could do so and have a nice little front end features where you can roll it out, give access to increased visual functionality all within your front end, and kind of make it very easy to launch in and out. And lastly, if you're going to launch it on the back end, one of the cool things about that is you can make it easy to connect a new database, you can launch new APIs, you can roll out different features or integrations on a case-by-case basis, all to make sure it's either a specific audience. One of the cool ones that they've recently done in the last year is they can do it based on device. So if you want to roll out a feature to just mobile users, you can do so, which is pretty rad. You can also give it added context. So you can do it by and create tags or feature flags based on number of deployments. One of the cool things that they've also got coming out this year is they've got the A/B context there. So if you want to start doing the A/B testing, figure out which features there, you can serve it to 2 different audiences based on groups. And I'll show you what that looks like within LaunchDarkly's application here. So this is kind of what it looks like within the LaunchDarkly backend. These are my 2 little feature flags I've created for this demo. But if we wanted to create a new feature flag after we've connected it using the SDK, what we can do is jump in. You'll see the different types of flags that you can create, whether it's kill switch, release, experiment, if you want to do those A/B tests, or even migrations, so database migrations, which is a new feature that's really coming out. We have a V1 of our database, we want to add a V2. We've cleaned up our database. I was part of a database migration at a company recently, and oh my goodness, the number of times that things broke in that database migration. I think I still have nightmares. But the whole point of this is that you can roll back to a safer, secure version or deploy it just in segments or little incremental features. Incremental features. Words today, y'all. Thought I got at least a chuckle out of that. All of this can be done just by turning it on and off. One thing, you can even schedule this based on different times or regions. So you can go to sleep, go ahead, push production on Friday. You can kind of undo it with the toggle and you're not having to undo your entire app. That all being said, this is what happens the first time giving this demo. Learning what slides are where. All right. So again, like I mentioned, for the sake of today, we're going to be working just on the back-end flags, not the front-end flags. So for the sake of today, we'll be walking through a couple quick little examples on how to use this within the back-end context. A couple of different API patterns that are available for you. Selective maintenance mode, so if you're curious about launching feature flags or getting things going, one thing that you can always make sure that just different groups have access to it. So many times, in my experience having used LaunchDarkly first as a user before I joined the team, one of the things that was really nice is, hey, I want to launch a developer beta. So these folks are A-okay if they see a few bugs, or if you're building a beta group, you want them to report those bugs, but you don't want the general population to get it because yikes, then your support lines are now completely clustered. So making sure that you're keeping those access to specific groups, and that can be internal groups or an early alpha deployment as well. You can do dynamic configuration. So one of the things that we can do here is making sure that we have different parameters based on deployment. So if you have a server that goes down, if you want to deploy it by regionality, if you want to deploy it again by device, those are all opportunities that are ways that you can deploy that differently. Another one that you can do is kind of those gradual rollouts, which is probably my most used use case that I've been working on, and the thing that I think is the most exciting when I was using this is, again, being able to catch those bugs before something happens. Again, really testing things on devices, location, regionality, or even custom defining groups. So one thing that you can do is even add individual users or add key demographics, things like how many times is the person logged in? I only want to serve this to people who have logged into 10 plus features or 10 plus times organizing this. And lastly, exposing that additional functionality. So say you're kind of making a really kind of a read-only and you want to kind of update that. So you're getting those Git or like, I only want certain teams to post, so on and so forth. One thing that's really nice about that is LaunchDarkly does allow you to segment out by different groups. So what we're going to do today is just kind of walk through a couple of scenarios. We're going to hand dirty some code, and as I mentioned, I'm using this. I'll give the full disclosure. This is my first time doing this demo, so feedback is welcome of what is the most helpful things for y'all to learn, because I'm going to be building that into the repo and sending it out to you afterwards. So feedback is 100% welcome, because personally, I love the gradual rollout, and I would do 100 times of that, but that's not everybody's cup of tea. All right. Another one is that kill switch. So again, making sure that things are working, building these nice little toggles like we saw within our, we're getting some cool mic echo here. The cool, much like we saw here, so currently we're seeing these on-off lists. If we want to turn those on and off, we can do so right within the feature. One thing, if we ever get those 502 errors, we're getting a nice little other error, what we can do The cool thing is, one thing is that some people thought and it's something I thought when I first started using LaunchDarkly, they're like, oh, this just comments out your code. No, it doesn't even read it. It doesn't even take up your runtime. What it does is it makes sure that you're kind of running through without even taking up that runtime and just running the parts that are relevant. So one is to keeping a fast deployment process, but also keeping it very smooth and safe. So keeping it simple. The default in a lot of these configurations is always the off setting, because you don't want to accidentally publish something, make it go live. Not always the greatest thing when you're starting a deployment. Any questions here before I kind of dive in? No? Cool. Great. So again, this is what it would look like if you've got that feature flag off. It's got that default as off, so you'll have that nice little stable existing code. So again, what this looks like, and again, if we want to continue, what we can do is play around with this within the app infrastructure, the app interface right now. So we'll be doing that and opening up our code editors in a second and doing that together if you'd like. But one of the things is this does work on both a front end and a back end situation. So many times Python's a great language. It's my personal favorite language to work in, but let's be honest, it's not always the best when you're building full-on, full-scale apps. Many times you're using multiple languages, or if you're building a giant, nice shiny front end, you've got to be able to connect it to a database in the back end. So in this example, what we've got is we're going to be showing an example of launching a new API. So this currently just shows we're building in the front end, we're accessing that back end API, and it's connected right to the database. Say we want to launch a new API. Boom, we're going to connect that front end. On that, if you'll notice on the little code snippet there, we're just creating a new toggle, and this new toggle only has the API. So we're not connecting to yet a new database yet, but we're merely connecting to that new API connection, or that new area there. You'll notice that it does kind of make sure that it removes that old API, again, saving you the runtime. What we can do is then keep that and log it almost segmentally. So you're not just shipping everything all at once. You can connect that and keep it connected to the old database, but a new API to test different elements incrementally, making sure that you're avoiding those features. So again, we've got our toggle set to off. The feature flag is new DB, and we'll be now turning on and moving that to the new DB on. So a lot of this is built in Python. We're using it for if-then statements. So you'll notice the kind of the structure is very much the same. Any questions here on that, kind of that logic of how that works before we dive into it? Yeah? Mm-hmm.
Before going back to the changes in the form DB or is there like any changes? Like let's say you roll out a feature
Mm-hmm.
and started using it. Like the old database is not the changes in the old database is it going to have
So it depends on how your API is set up. So reiterating the question to make sure that, one, everybody can hear it, but just to make sure I'm understanding it. He's calling out the point that the new backend is connected to the old database. So will those changes, how does that impact that core database and the API, right? So it depends on how your API is built. So depending on the type of API, if it's just like a git command, like a git, if you're running an API call, you'll be able to call from that database pretty easily. You will see if you're using a post command, it'll still go back and edit that core database. So just because that's where the connection is. But it'll kind of depend on how your API is set up and what calls you're doing.
like the core database?
Mm-hmm.
Because like sometimes like your new database schema is different from your core database schema.
Yep.
And your API would have like some differences between the old API and the new.
Yep.
How does that play?
So it really depends on like how you, like I can give you the answer. It depends, it's like such a developer answer, right? Because one of the things that I mentioned is sometimes your API schema is slightly different or your database schema is slightly different. In that type of situation, one of the ways that I've seen this kind of rewritten in LaunchDarkly is using a git feature flag. So you're not pushing new data, you're just calling old data. So it's just a call command, you're not posting data, you're not pushing new data, you're just calling that existing data. And many times when you're doing an API, it has the different schemas. If you're doing a more widespread rollout where you're making significant changes to the new backend, which has that API, and significant changes to the new database, like you've refactored or you've restructured something, doing these in very, very small or like tight increments. So you're not necessarily like taking months in between the deployments, but rather like weeks or even a week, a couple of days, can really help you mitigate those errors and changes. Does that make sense? Cool. Yeah, no worries. And I'll show you what that looks like if you want to chat afterwards. I do have an API that calls from James Bond data movie trailers, and I do have a random database of my reality TV show stuff if you guys want to geek out on weird APIs I build in my free time because I want to justify writing off my Hulu subscription as a tax write-off. Don't tell the IRS on me. But as you can see, we've toggled that feature flag to on, and we're connected to that new database right there. Whew. All right. So as I mentioned, you can target your releases based on pretty much anything. So this is, again, using that nice friendly Python if-else format or if-then format. Creates these, like that enable new is those feature flags. And also the other feature flag would be new feature. So we have the enable new. It has what we turn on. And if it's not going to be the new feature, what it's going to do is it's going to have the existing code. So you're keeping the existing code there just in case you ever need to toggle that off. And it does turn into a no code type if you ever need to, once you've got it set up in your core database, passing it off to a PM in case that you need to ever turn that on and off. So the cool thing about this is you've got some great little release conditions. So whether it's the device that you want to be targeting, if you want to be targeting different locations based on your servers, or the different groups that you're accessing in. So I want to launch this to just my testers, my groups. I want to be testing it to just different organizations. I don't want to just be shipping this widespread to absolutely everybody. All right. So targeting and context. How do we set up these feature flags? And what does this look like in practice? So one we want to set up is our LaunchDarkly groups. So LaunchDarkly within their application has different groups you can set up. So you can start to create different properties or different groups. So in this example, I just have an add database one. You can target different segments all within the LaunchDarkly app yourself. And you can start to see what this looks like from the app backend. It's yelling at me because I haven't set this up yet, and my code currently has this all commented out. But what are the different like prerequisites you want to have? So you can set off like, they have these other feature flags enabled. They have different target audience. You can set up different groups. So I think in my group, I have super secret spy in one of these demo examples. Whatever that you want to be adding that context to is all available within LaunchDarkly. All right, so again, enabling those on, adding in those components, creating those new items, and then having that else statement. So you have the application code showing you what that off looks like, keeps it to the existing code. The way that this works is currently we'll be using the LaunchDarkly Python SDK for today, Python client-side SDK because we're playing around with backends. But we do have SDKs available in all of these different languages, including a few more that aren't even pictured here. But you will have to hit me up in a few weeks on them because I'm in still my first few weeks. So hit them up when I've got some more time under my belt here, and I'll tell you all about the new SDKs that we've got rolling out here. That all being said, it is also available kind of across the board in a bunch of different ways. And there's a bunch of get started tutorials if you're looking to get started. In the meantime, does anybody want to build? We actually want to build some stuff. So this is a great little screen. I'm gonna keep this up, take this nice little screenshot. I find this really helpful when you're getting started with the Python SDK. So what we're gonna be doing today, and I'll take us back to the repo if you want to, but the Python SDK, we're gonna do pip3 or just pip, depending on how you have it installed. I have a constant gripe that Python, we always have Python and Python 3 because I just find that a major gripe. pip3 install LaunchDarkly server SDK. Notice that we have the server SDK because we're going to be working on the backend then. From there, we'll be importing the modules within our file using LaunchDarkly client config, import config, importing that all in. setting up our SDK key. So I'll show you where you can find that within your repo, or find out within the Launch Directly backend, and I'll give you an SDK key that you can play around with and we can goof off and have some fun with. And then setting up the different contexts. So when we want to set up different contexts, so example, if we were going to be building, for the sake of today, moving it from a hello world to launching a basic API, you can do so right here. We can also show how you can connect it to a database, more advanced database, or even just like an introductory database there. And lastly, we'll walk through how to evaluate the flag and actually make sure that your flag is working and everything's up and going within that context. Any questions before we begin? Questions about this in general? Databases? I know we kind of powered through that. Cool. All right. And for those of you who are just jumping in, I'm going to grab where we're building off of. So we are just building here. This is a repo that I have. If you want to build together, if you are like, nah, I don't want to build, that's totally cool too. You can listen to the sound of my not Morgan Freeman voice. And so we've got about 15, 20 minutes. We can get started, we can have some fun. All of this is based off of, so just the Next.js fast API starter. So I just basically forked this, played around with it. It is just kind of gets you up with a basic Next.js and Python application. If you want to check this out, first of all, it's pretty great if you ever want to get started with learning some of these Next.js projects. I'm not going to dive into the Next.js side of things today just because this is the Python conference and we're hanging out in Python land, but if you do want to learn more about Next.js, these starter templates are really fun if you're a fellow chaos dev like me that likes to learn by breaking. And then the next little thing that we're going to be working on is opening up. I'm going to re-fork this so we can all be on the same page. Choo-choo-choo. Be re-forking all of the fun. You can see all the different crazy versions I'm in. PyData Live. Services. I'm a work girly. Anybody else been using work for a terminal? It's a terminal that has some minor like minor AI stuff in it, so you can get some auto. It's like Copilot within the terminal. It's kind of nice, but also the cool thing I like about it is if you're ever, I teach at NYU on the side, so I teach to journalists and I do a lot of like data journalism stuff. One of the nice things is I can set up like packages and like environments, and I can be like, go, run, and the terminal will remember it, which is kind of nice. Not sponsored, not paid by work, just really like the tool. So if you're looking for a new terminal or you want to geek out on that kind of stuff, have a great time. We're ready to rock and roll. So all I've done is taken my GitHub repo, I've cloned it using the terminal, and I'm going to open up VS Code, file, open, and I'll pull my PyData Live folder, and it'll have my ship like a spy right here. So you'll see what we're working with. It's got my beautiful, for those of you who haven't worked with kind of something like this before, the basic kind of run through is we're going to be launching here. We'll have our app information is right here. So you'll see this controls our front like homepage of the site. And then where we're going to be clicking here is you'll see where it gets started here on this nice little API Python. It's where we're going to click up here, API. That's maybe not Python, that's probably what we're getting there. Is we're going to be calling from here, and this is our API. So open up a terminal window within here. All right. So now that we've got it forked, I have this one connected to, I'm going to go pull up my one that's connected to this beautiful item here, but one of the things that we're gonna be working on, just with a few little moments we've got left, just on a time crunch here. I always forget how long these things take me until I'm up here for talking for 45 or way too long. But you'll see on our API here, what we've got is we'll be importing fast API. One thing I want to do is make sure that I'm importing in launch darkly. So I've got this commented out. We're going to go ahead and set up a virtual environment. So pip and virtual. Let's see if I already have mine set up because I was responsible. And at any point, if you have any questions of what I'm doing, feel free to holler at me. All right, we've got the inbound. So I've installed it. Where is my other VS Code window that I've got open? All right, so this one's connected in. So we're gonna go cheat and go back into our nice little one that's already connected in for the sake of today's quick little tutorial and demo here. One of the things, all right. What we're gonna be working on today is, there we go. So installing, making sure that we've got our launch dark, didn't connect our virtual environment. Anywho, we're going to be importing in launch darkly. We're gonna do a quick cheater demo here just to show what it would look like. But one of the things is we're gonna import your launch darkly SDK from here, also making sure that we're importing our launch darkly client. This is good notes for me as I do this demo next time. Next up, we are going to be taking this and importing from the launch darkly config, import config. This already has what will load us our fast API app. This is just an extra one here. I've got an extra commented out version just for my own notes purposes. Add in that comment. You'll see here for the purposes here in the launch darkly purposes, we've got a static user we'll create. So again, when we want to do our feature flag by user, we're going to be calling it in here from the base model. So this is just pulling from, again, you normally use like something that would have an integer or a string. For today's locally hosted demo, we can just do a quick little first name, last name, key. That's just a silly key there I've added in. You've also got email, and then notice under groups we have super spy. We want to pull this back up, what this looks like and what this populates like in the launch darkly backend. Is if we wanted to do I'm gonna pull up another one, just to cheat for a second. So pulling, wow, words today. Pulling up a existing version is we have this targeting, and this is just for a Star Wars similar app. We can pull up the different versions in our groups. I'm actually going to go back to ours and just load it up anyway. So we have our database. What we'll do is we can just target by groups here. So if I've got my existing feature flag target segments, we can start to add in different groups. I don't currently have my SDK connected, so you won't be able to add, but we can go ahead and this is where we add in our different user groups or targets here. So we would add in our different user targets and different groups here, and that would pop in. Now, all right. one of the things that we've got here. So again, we're just doing a simple hello world at this current moment. Once we've gotten past that, what we'll do is after we've created this, we can launch our feature flags here. And I'll need to update those for the feature flags, so I'll get this working. But just so you kind of, for a quick example on these run through, just so you can see it in action, we've got our feature flag. We'll install the SDK API key here. You'll find everything through the account settings within your LaunchDarkly portal. Under this, you'll see, and we'll print that early launch on, and print early launch is off. But I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up here for today, just kind of to bring this back here. But one of the things is getting this tutorial a little bit more wrapped up, so that's great feedback for myself. But one of the things is we'll kind of get this up and going and deploying it, but I want to take any time opening up for questions here, so on and so forth. But I know we got pretty quick here. Any questions? Yeah.
In the user class, the base model that you're inheriting from, is that coming from Fast API?
User class right here.
Yeah.
Yep. So that is coming from the base model does come from another version of Fast API if you want to build a different database. So this is part of another database structure. So this is part of my chaos dev rebuilding it and tutorial in over a weekend. So I think I probably pulled this in from another database. So that's probably my error in coding there.
Okay, just curious. Yeah.
Yeah.
It like looks similar to something else that you use called PyData, but I haven't.
I haven't used PyData a ton, but I do know that there is a base model when you do PyData.
Yeah.
There's also a version when you do Flask has a different version, but I am a terrible Flask programmer, so don't ask me about Flask. I'm good at breaking Flask. A good call out. Any other questions here? Yeah.
Hey, hi Erin, really great presentation, thank you for that. I have just a quick question regarding how to, is it possible to launch, sorry not launch, but is it possible to deploy LaunchDarkly as self-hosted service? Because what I take from this is that whenever I set a new flag, it's going to do a quick web request to the LaunchDarkly web server, just check if it is true or false, and based on that it will quickly fetch and run the code. What is presented inside the if statement or else statement?
Yeah.
Is that true?
I would have to confirm with someone else because I do believe there is a self-hosted option, but it does operate through like webhooks and API calls. I would have to confirm because I do believe so, because I do believe that's an enterprise feature, but not 100% sure on that. So I can confirm and sync it back with you on that.
Yeah,
So I'm here all weekend and I'll add that. I'm going to add that into the repo, and then in the repo, feel free to open up an issue or a comment and I'll replace all that.
Thank you.
Of course. I know this is like case of demo god's not on favor today, but we'll rip the band-aid. Thanks for being part of the group today and all the fun with that, but we'll get that up and going and send it off to your world. Any other questions, comments? We can build other cool things too. You can also, I do have a demo where you can launch this within a Docker file, so I can also send this and publish that as well if you guys are Docker fanboys, fangirls, fanfolk. It is kind of fun to run these databases within launching and deploying in a Docker file as well. But in the meantime, how many tabs do I have open in just the length of a tutorial? If you have any fun questions, comments, concerns, come hang out with me. I will be here all weekend at the conference. You guys will hear me in the breakout sessions. I will be updating this repo throughout the weekend, so feel free to holler if you have any questions. This is what you get for doing a tutorial last minute. You're filling in for people who get sick, but we're here, we're doing it, we're live. Find me at the following locations or just come hang out with me on the internet. Oh yeah, one last question.
What's that sidebar thing you have? Off topic?
Oh, this thing?
Yeah.
This is the Arc browser.
Arc browser.
So it's Chrome based, it's a browser company's browser. I actually really like it if you're a keyword shortcut. Yeah, they're out of beta now, so I think they're widely available.
They've been updated.
If you want to like ever geek out on feature releases, we can go on a complete tangent about this, but like they have the best changelog I've ever met in my entire life because they use their own product for the changelog. And I have been, literally, I have a board of like ideas I want to do, and it's their changelog. Because like, I think their changelog is like so well done. Let's find their changelog to do. So you can see, where it is. Of course I say that and I'm like, where? It just pops up every week, it pops up in the app. Let's see, arc. But it pops up and they use their own app for the changelog, but the way that they do it is like just amazing. We could geek out. I honestly could give an entire talk on changelogs. This is my backup talk idea, is just changelogs because I'm obsessed with them. And why you shouldn't just auto-write them with ChatGPT. I'm seeing some hashing. Like, I have also I've been on the team, I've been a developer advocate who's had to clean up after changelogs that have been written by ChatGPT. So that's a dev stories after dark for crying.
Halloween was yesterday.
What?
Halloween was yesterday.
Yeah, Halloween's pretty, I mean, there's always a dev stories after dark. That's always I do host a once monthly Twitch stream that is dev tales after dark, if you ever want to talk about that. When it's things that went wrong for funsies. But, yeah. Any other questions while we're here today? No? Great. Well, thank you so much for hanging out and all that good stuff. I'll see you out there the weekend. And I will be updating this repo so you actually can work on it without my bugs and chaos here. So,
Well,
yeah.
thanks, Erin. Let's give Erin.